All right, hi everybody, how's it going? And welcome to another video. Now, I want to do another movie review today, and the movie that I'm going to be reviewing is a movie I recently saw called The Art of Self Defense, starring Jesse Eisenberg. I thought this was a very unusual, strange film, and yet at the same time, I liked it. I definitely liked it, but it wasn't like anything I had ever seen before. It was definitely a different movie. This is a film that is like a satire or spoofs what's been called Bullshido. You hear about, Bullshido every now and again. I've probably heard about it maybe, I don't know, within the past few years, and it that pertains to, Bullshido pertains to things such as, martial arts charlatans or McDojos, martial arts no touch masters, the different kinds of things you'll see on the internet that yeah, have been referred to as Bullshido. And this movie spoofs that. It's like satire of that. I would consider it to be a dark comedy. It would be called a dark comedy. But yeah, it really takes kind of an unexpected turn. Now, I am going to do a movie review and I am going to be giving out spoilers. So if you did not see this film, spoiler alert, you might want to watch the film before you see the video. But, anyways, it starts out Jesse Eisenberg plays this guy who ends up getting mugged one day, and as a result of getting mugged, he goes out and he buys a gun. And he's waiting, he has to wait for like a background check in order to get the gun. Well, while he's doing that, he signs up for a karate class. And this karate class is taught in, a very like kind of militant way. The instructor's a lot like the Cobra Kai sensei from the movie The Karate Kid. He's a lot like that. The class is like very hierarchical kind of structure. A lot of people talking about belts and this person talking about how they outrank that person because of their belt. So it has that kind of structure to it and has that atmosphere, kind of a very old school kind of atmosphere, which could be good. However, things start to really get kind of toxic in this. It really gets kind of toxic and violent. And then the movie takes a completely unexpected turn, and the turn I didn't even expect. And it becomes something more like a suspense thriller. And I didn't see that coming at all. I didn't expect that. So it's kind of interesting how they did that. But yeah, this film takes place. They never really say when this film takes place. You could kind of assume by the way people look and by the way the computer monitors look and the VHS tapes, you could kind of assume that this film takes place somewhere between the years 1988 and 1992. But they never really tell you an exact year as to when it takes place. That's never given, but you could kind of assume it takes place at around that time because that's kind of a time when you would hear about these kinds of like McDojos or martial arts schools that would become cult like, that would become kind of like cults where the instructors would, brainwash and indoctrinate students, a lot of times into paying them more money, or you'd hear about students getting beaten and different things like that, and you would hear about this at around this time. And the instructor in this film is kind of like that. He only wants to be called sensei. They never tell you his real name. He just wants to be called sensei. And I was kind of thinking about like how he kind of runs his school like a cult. And I know in the Chicagoland area, back around this time that this movie probably takes place, kind of around 89 or 90, there were a chain of martial arts schools called Jung Moo Kwan. It was started by a guy by the name of John C. Kim, who came over from Korea in the early 70s. And I guess he started out as a janitor, But then he opened up all these martial arts schools, claimed to be the master of 8 martial arts, and he also claimed to have a title called Master of Asia, which other martial artists and instructors have said they never heard of such a title. But he claimed to have this title called Master of Asia that he claimed he got from winning a tournament. So, yeah, you had that. And then I guess what this guy had done was he was charging students, this John C. Kim was charging students a lot of money without telling them how much, without having like set prices. He was charging them money, and then the longer they stayed, the more he would charge, and people would have to pay a lot of money that they were completely unaware of. And also, I guess he claimed to be able he claimed to get people to like black belt level real fast in a real short amount of time if they paid $25,000. That was another thing I had heard. And there's other reports of abuse that he had done, and abuse that he had inflicted upon students. And then what had happened was he, along with 4 other of his student teachers, got a prison sentence of 5 years, I believe it was, 5 years for conspiracy to commit tax fraud. And I guess, when he got out of jail, which I think was around 2001, he then moved to California. I think in California he still ran schools, and then he died around 2016. But yeah, that kind of reminded me, John C. Kim kind of reminded me of the instructor in this movie. Reminded me of that. Not all instructors, of course, are like this at these martial arts schools. Some are great people, but this film shows someone that's not so great. And yeah, also, like, it takes place in 1990, and it just seemed like, that was a time, I think, when you could kind of deceive people a little more in this way, because people didn't have the information. There was pre-internet. In a few years it would be more difficult to pull this kind of thing off, but at this time you still could. And also, you didn't have things like the UFC at this time, or the UFC showed which martial arts were really effective and which ones weren't as effective. And and that when the time this movie was made, people were unaware of a lot of things involving the martial arts. So, there's still schools out there that, are like this, that still schools out there that do deceive people, but there's just less of that today. There's just less of that. But yeah, anyways, this film, what happens is Jesse Eisenberg is at this school, and eventually the instructor wants to film his students get into fights. And then you find out that he's filming his students get into fights, and he's releasing these videos through a series called Faces of Fist, kind of like Faces of Death, kind of like a hardcore kind of film series like that, and he's releasing it. And I think he's even showing people, get killed in these fights. So it really becomes kind of like a suspense thriller. It really does. And, like I said, I didn't see that coming. The movie definitely surprised me in a lot of ways. But yeah, and you had like other, like, martial arts charlatans too, kind of like this. I was thinking when I watched this about Count Dante. Now, Count Dante is kind of interesting because some people claim that he was a charlatan, while other people are like, the guy was really good, really good. So, people are divided in their opinion on Count Dante. So he's kind of an interesting one. I know there's another guy too. After Count Dante had died, I believe this individual claimed to be kind of like the heir to Count Dante's Black Dragon Fighting Arts Society, an individual by the name of Ashita Kim. And Ashita Kim, around 1980, you had the ninja craze. And the ninja craze, from what I'm told, started as a result of the Chuck Norris film The Octagon. That kicked off the ninja craze. And Ishida Kim was putting out all these like ninja training manuals that people were getting. And he also put out some training videos as well. So, you had, people like him, and I mentioned Count Dante. I did do, like I said, a video on Count Dante, which I do recommend checking out if you want to. I talk more about Count Dante in that video. But yeah, it's just interesting. You also have Frank Dukes. Now, probably heard of Frank Dukes. He's the guy Jean-Claude Van Damme played in the film Bloodsport. I talked about Bloodsport in another video, and in that video I also talk a bit about Frank Dukes. Some people think he's legit, some people think he's not. Either way, Bloodsport was a great movie. I mean, it really was a good movie. And I've seen Frank Dukes in videos, and he always really comes off like a really nice guy in the videos I've seen. So I don't know what to believe. But anyways, getting back to this, yeah, this movie definitely takes a lot of unexpected turns. I didn't expect it to go in the direction it did. I do recommend it, though, because it is an interesting film. There are some funny moments in this film as well. There's the instructor, the guy who only wants to be referred to as sensei, says that his instructor, the Grand Master, was the only one to achieve the rank of Rainbow Belt. And he achieved the rank of Rainbow Belt, the highest rank in a system that he had created. So it's kind of funny. He's showing he's got this Rainbow Belt, the greatest of all belts in his own system. So yeah, there's some funny moments in this. But like I said, it is a dark comedy. And it's just interesting when you think back these kinds of things. I even remember seeing a movie. It was after Bruce Lee had died. I believe this movie actually came out in the early 80s. So Bruce Lee may have already had, died maybe 10 years before this movie came out or so. And in this movie, it started out they were trying to find who the next Bruce Lee would be. And I guess the guy they said would be the next Bruce Lee was an individual by the name of Ron Van Cleef. And, Ron Van Cleef, I guess he had won some karate tournaments back then. And he was, I want to say, in one of the earlier UFCs, where I believe he went up against Royce Gracie. But yeah, that movie then changes to a biography on Bruce Lee that is completely fictitious. Completely fictitious. It talks about Bruce Lee coming from a long line of Japanese samurai. And, Bruce Lee wasn't even Japanese. He was Chinese. I mean, the movie's completely false. It's just weird how, at that time you could kind of deceive people that way. Like the movie was completely fictitious. And, yeah, completely fictitious. In fact, they kind of did deceive people a bit back then, from what I know, because I know people would think that Bruce Lee made more movies than he did because there were other people who used the name Bruce Lee. Like there was someone who had the name Bruce Lee, Lee spelled L-I, a completely different person making movies under the name Bruce Lee. Well, not everyone knew Bruce Lee had died back then. Information didn't really spread the way it does today. So, yeah, I did want to mention that. And also, speaking of like Bruce Lee or, Japanese samurai, some of these martial arts instructors will, and one thing that they have done that I've heard is they'll claim sometimes to have been trained by the guy who was trained by the guy who was the last student of Bruce Lee. Or they'll make those kinds of claims. Or they'll claim that their martial arts school traces its lineage back to feudal Japan or something. So you do have that with some of these martial arts schools. But like I said, not all of them are like that, of course. Some martial arts schools are good and definitely have a positive influence on people. But yeah, this movie showcases kind of one that isn't so good, and you really see that. Yeah, definitely a good film. I definitely recommend it. If you've watched this video, as always, I thank you for watching. Have a good night.